Sonic Racing Crossworlds is a game that's honestly really surprised me. I grew up with most of the other Sonic Racing games. Sonic Riders Zero Gravity was one of the first Wii games I played at a friend's house. I played a shit ton of both All-Stars racing games when those were new, and I almost got grounded trying to play Sonic R because my dad thought it stood for Sonic Rated R instead of Sonic Racing. Yeah, I don't think that's a game I'd really want to play either. While I would play these games with my brothers every once in a while, the Sonic Racing games were never super popular with the rest of my friend group. Games like Riders have a pretty steep learning curve, so it was hard to convince them to dedicate any real time to learning its ins and outs. And while the All-Stars racing games were an easier sell, to them they left a lot to be desired when compared to something like Mario Kart. I guess they thought II wasn't as cool as Luigi or something. Doesn't make any sense to me. Thankfully, most of these games had a pretty healthy single-player component, so I would often play these games off and on by myself, up until Team Sonic Racing's release, where I just kinda lost interest. The newest entry in the sub-series, Sonic Racing Crossworlds, was announced in late 2024, a return to form for the series when compared to TSR with a new focus on the titular Crossworlds, intermissions that temporarily transport you to a different race location, basically just an excuse to bring together tons of iconic locations from across the Sonic franchise. While the concept seemed neat, my interest in the game sort of waned after being unimpressed with the game's closed beta that following February. The game was a little more frustrating to play back then due to its item balancing and overall less polished gameplay, so I wasn't really feeling it at the time. Thankfully, as time went on and we saw more and more of the game and its eventual release this past September, I've slowly come to really enjoy the game and what it has to offer. 2025 was a pretty busy year for kart racers, with games like Mario Kart World and Kirby Air Riders swooping in to steal some of the spotlight. Both of these games set out to do something more unique and experimental with their take on the kart racing genre, to varying degrees of success. And while each of those have their strengths, I keep finding myself gravitating towards the newest Sonic entry, which got me thinking, what is it that keeps me coming back to this game? Outside of being a massive Sonic fan anyway. Sonic Racing Crossworlds is nothing that new for the Sonic Racing franchise. Its gameplay is fairly derivative of the past few entries and doesn't really add anything new in terms of racing mechanics. Instead, the old ones are just refined to near perfection. It takes everything that worked about the games that came before it and polishes it to its strongest elements, and I think that ends up being one of its biggest strengths. It results in an extremely addicting arcade racer that's really difficult to put down. That's not to say it doesn't have strong mechanical depth to call its own, but I think its relative simplicity, especially compared to its contemporaries, is what helps it shine so much brighter. I've been seeing a lot of comparisons between Crossworlds and Mario Kart World specifically, but none that really capture what I think makes this game stand out. So join me today as we take a deep dive and explore what exactly makes Sonic Racing Crossworlds so addicting. Crossworlds structurally is very similar to the All-Stars racing games that came before it. It mainly consists of 3-lap races, where you drift around corners to build up boost charges while picking up and evading a plethora of different items. The game maintains the plane and boat modes introduced in All-Stars Racing Transformed, and expands on car customization mechanics introduced in Team Sonic Racing. The biggest change mechanically is probably with the trick system. In previous games, tricks were harder to pull off. In Riders, for example, you had to charge a jump ahead of time to get the most air, and you could get more distance or height depending on what direction you held the control stick during a jump. There's tons of shortcuts that take advantage of this feature, so tricks became more than just a way to refill your air gauge, they became a part of the track design itself. In the All-Stars racing games, tricks were simplified to fit the traditional vehicle setup. You can do tricks in the air to build up to 3 boost charges, but tricks in these games are typically heavier and take more time to perform, and you lose all of your charges and spin out if you fail a trick, so there's a risk-reward aspect to getting the most out of every jump. Crossworlds simplifies this even further by making it to where you can't fail a trick, and this disappointed a couple people since it technically lowers the skill ceiling. Admittedly, I was a little bummed at first too, but the more I played the game, the more I came to accept the change. This game goes for a far more chaotic vibe than the other games in the series, and I think the changes to the trick system reflect this. Instead of having to focus on when's the best time to perform a trick, you instead just spam the stick to see how many rotations you can get at once. Coupled with the gadgets that let you perform air tricks faster, it becomes fun watching the character spaz out every time there's a jump, and seeing just how far you can push it. I can see why people wouldn't like this change all too much, but I think it works with the way the rest of the game is set up. It might simplify the trick mechanic, but I don't think that's inherently a bad thing, since it adds to the chaotic nature of Crossworlds races. There's no attempt at any kind of story mode this time around, Instead, the game only features the basic racing game modes you'd expect, like Grand Prix and time trial modes. But the standard races have a new unique flair to them. There's a ton of iconic course locations this time around, some from previous Sonic games like Metal Harbor, Ocean Palace, and Aptos, and there's even courses based on Frontiers and Superstars. There's also a few new locations like Rainbow Garden, Colorful Mall, and Wonder Museum. While every race is still composed of 3 laps, the second lap of every race is now dedicated to a specific Crossworld, temporarily transporting you to an entirely different racetrack. These can either be Crossworld-specific tracks like Dragon Road, Steampunk City, and Casino Park, or after beating every Grand Prix, the rest of the game's standard courses are also added to the list. The track selection is a love letter to the entire Sonic franchise. Not only did they bring back classic levels like Radical Highway and Spagonia, but they even have callbacks to games that aren't referenced very often, like Secret Rings in the form of 2 different Crossworlds. Even the new track locations do a great job of feeling like they fit in with the rest of the Sonic world, some of my favorites aesthetically being Eggman Expo and Aqua Forest. In a way, this game is a mix of every modern Sonic racing game. Obviously you have the more traditional vehicle races of the original All-Stars Racing, the vehicle transformations and dynamic lap changes from Transformed or back, and the customization features of Team Sonic Racing have been expanded upon. This game does a great job of making every race feel dynamic. Obviously you have the Crossworld transitions in the middle of every race, but on most courses the third lap will slightly change the stage's layout. What actually changes depends on the stage. In courses like E-Stadium, changes are limited to a new warp ring shortcut appearing about halfway through the stage. But in other courses like Aptos, the second half of the track takes you in the opposite direction of lap 1. Or in Metal Harbor, a giant rocket appears in the middle of the stage that sends you flying in the air. These changes are often subtle, at least compared to the more bombastic changes featured in Transformed, but they're enough to open up new shortcuts to take into consideration near the end of each race. The dynamic nature of every race does a good job of making them all feel somewhat unique. Even playing the same course multiple times in a row can feel completely different. The Crossworld selection is randomized, since the player in first place at the end of the first lap gets to choose between 2 different options. So unless you're playing with someone who's really boring, it's highly unlikely that you'll get the same track and Crossworld combination multiple times in one sitting. Something I think this game does really well compared to its predecessors is feeling like a Sonic racing game. Other games in this series had a focus on Sega characters as well, even if Sonic is very clearly the main star. And while I love the characters and track locations in those games, there were always some aspects of those games that felt a little more generic, namely the item selection. Generic boxing gloves or bombs aren't very interesting compared to the stylized shells and bananas in Mario Kart, for example, that fit better in-universe. Since this game more or less ditches the extraneous Sega aspect in its core foundation, the game's aesthetic is able to stick more to the Sonic franchise as a whole. There's tons of different locations from across the series, both new and old, and there's sometimes stage objects on tracks that you'd find in traditional Sonic games. There are rings on the track that you can collect to increase your max speed, and some stages also have trick rings that help you reach shortcuts, just like in the main games. A lot of the items are now lifted right from the Sonic series. There's still a few generic ones like the spike ball, giant weight, or the returning punching glove, but they replaced a lot of the other items with wisps, namely white wisps for boosts, or the laser and drill wisp that shoot you ahead in the form of catch-up items. King Boom Boo from Sonic Adventure 2 is the blue shell equivalent of this game, which is really charming. I never really thought they would bring him back. In Grand Prix mode, each course has a set of red rings to collect. Some of them are placed right on the beaten path, but others are hidden in shortcuts, which act as an incentive to explore and learn each track to find them all. All of these factors give the game a more unified identity compared to the All-Stars Racing games, which is greatly appreciated even if it wasn't a glaring flaw in those other games. I also think that it's neat that the Sonic vibe managed to bake itself into the game itself in the form of the game's single-player offerings. Despite lacking any kind of story mode like Team Sonic Racing or the Riders games, Crossworlds still features a fair amount of single-player options in the form of time trials and Grand Prix modes. The time trials are pretty fun in this game. They give you a letter ranking like in the mainline games, and they can actually be pretty challenging, something the mainline games could maybe learn from. Getting S ranks requires expert knowledge of every course, and what gadgets and vehicle builds work best on each one. Heck, even some of the A ranks were kicking me in the ass, looking at you, Kraken Bay. You can unlock songs from previous Sonic games by getting at least an A rank in these time trials. These songs can then be set to play in races using the jukebox, allowing you to pick specific songs for each lap or shuffle through a list of favorites. So there's a reason to attempt and complete time trials even if you don't want to sweat for the highest ranking. One of my favorite new additions is the rival mechanic. In Grand Prix mode, you can select another driver to be your rival, and depending on who your character is, they'll banter with each other throughout the cup. Most kart racers have one or two computer players that are set to a higher difficulty, so that the player isn't constantly sweeping the entire Grand Prix. And I think it's really neat that they decided to take this concept and flesh it out into a full-blown feature. Trash talk is a staple of multiplayer party games like this, and one of the Sonic franchise's biggest draws is its massive cast of quirky characters. Combine the two and you have a recipe for an extremely fun and memorable inclusion. This game includes a pretty sizable amount of playable racers, so it's fun mixing around different characters to see what kind of interactions you can get between them. Characters you'd never really see interact in a normal setting have tons of unique dialogue. It adds a layer of replayability and spice to each Grand Prix, and you can even unlock Super Sonic for single player if you beat every rival, which I really love. It reminds me of grinding away at the Sonic Riders mission modes to unlock Super Sonic in those games. Part of me wishes you could use Super Sonic online as a skin or something, but it's still a really fun inclusion. Crossworlds single-player offerings are filled with a charm you'd be hard-pressed to find in many other kart racers. A lot of these factors combine to create a game that feels like it fits right in with the rest of the Sonic franchise. Despite dropping the Sega All-Stars aspect of the previous games, they still added a handful of crossover characters in the form of paid and free DLC. Sega-owned characters like Joker, Knights, and Hatsune Miku were added as racers, and there's even some characters from franchises outside of Sega, like SpongeBob, Pac-Man, and Minecraft. The latter third-party characters are paid DLC, but to compensate for the paywall, they come with unique courses too. I really like the inclusion of these bonus characters. Any game where I can play as SpongeBob on an extreme gear, or Joker in the paddy wagon is a 10 out of 10 for me. While I love this addition on paper, I can't help but feel that their inclusion is a little half-assed. None of the DLC characters have voice clips. Any sound effects that would be a voice line on a main character are instead replaced by sound effects from the character's respective games. I totally understand not wanting to record new dialogue for stuff like rival interactions, but we really couldn't be bothered to pull voice lines from pre-existing games as a compromise. This especially stinks for the paid DLC characters. If I'm paying for what's supposed to be a premium racer, they should at least come with voice lines. You're telling me SpongeBob of all characters doesn't have a giant sound bank of voice lines to pull from? It's still fun playing with these bonus characters, then I'd rather have them here as is than not at all, but I'm still not a huge fan of how they approach their voices regardless. If I had to pick something else in this game I wasn't a huge fan of, it would probably be the item balance. Items in kart racers have always had the potential to be a little annoying. After all, that is pretty much their job. Their main function is to be a nuisance to give an edge to lower skilled players, but I feel that some of Crossworld's item balance is a tad too aggressive for its own good. Most items in this game are attack items that will slow down your opponent when hit, which is fine most of the time, but I feel like some of them could be toned down just a little bit. There's a few items like the slime that slows you down, messes with your controls, and also takes away whatever item you have, which I feel is a little too much. The slime item is like the blooper item from Mario Kart, where it hits multiple people at once, and because it can hit pretty much the entire lobby, I think it's a little unfair for one item to have all of those properties. It doesn't help that getting hit in this game is a lot more punishing than it is in games like Mario Kart, since you essentially slow down to a stop, so getting hit every few seconds can be more demoralizing than it's worth. Most of the other items are pretty fairly balanced. You can dodge or block most of them with your own items if you're prepared, so it gives you an incentive to hold on to something in case you need it. Something kind of neat this game does is give both good and bad items the same spawn animation, so you never exactly know what item is coming after you. This means you can gamble on whether or not the item that's about to hit you is worth dodging or not, on the off chance that it's a black chow that gives you items or something. It adds a neat little layer of split-second decision making whenever an item is about to hit you. I also sort of wish there was a way to turn down the frequency of character voice lines. I praised the trash talking with the rival stuff earlier, but some of the voice lines for stuff like tricks can be a little much at times. There's only so many times I can hear Sonic yell out, "Good night, Jammin! Good night, great! Good night, Jammin!" before I start to go just a little insane. Well, I guess I am already a Sonic fan. Maybe I'm too far gone as it is. This is a common theme with a lot of the characters. They felt the need to give everyone repetitive voice lines for tricks and stuff for some reason, and it can get a little grating, I'm not gonna lie. They decided to make Silver a cowboy for some reason. I guess they still have those in the future, who knew? And don't get me started on Rouge. Her lines are interesting, to say the least. There is an option to turn down the volume of the voice lines in the options menu, but I like listening to the character voices in other instances, so I tend to gravitate away from messing with that too much. I guess I can handle just a little bit more.
Good night, Jammin!
Other than those small nitpicks though, there's not a whole lot that I have to complain about with this game. Crossworlds manages to remain simple, but approachable. Its chaotic nature keeps me coming back for more, while managing to stay consistently engaging. Something I can't really say for some other racing game that came out this year. When talking about Crossworlds, it's hard not to compare it to Mario Kart World. Not only did the games come out months apart from each other, but I think it's interesting how they both ended up tackling a similar theme. Both games play with the idea of freedom and player expression, and how that applies to the kart racing genre, albeit each game goes about it in a different way. Mario Kart World tries to integrate it into its core structure, combining the 3-lap kart racer with an open world. Every course is located on one interconnected map, creating a cohesive world that the player can drive wherever they want, whenever they want. This shines the most in the game's free roam mode, where the player can drive wherever they want with no limitations, with no concrete objective other than the optional mini-challenges darted across the map. It's really easy to get lost in this world, driving around seeing what's hidden in every nook and cranny. It's honestly pretty impressive seeing how much detail was put into just about every aspect of the map. If you can see something off in the distance, there's a 90% chance that you can go there. Playing around in the open world reminds me a lot of exploring tracks in time trial mode as a kid, only this time I can actually go to the places that would normally be out of bounds. The open world might seem superfluous outside of free roam mode, since you're railroaded on a specific path in most other scenarios, but I think it's important to highlight how the open world influences standard track design and racing. Mario Kart World features an expanded trick system that allows you to jump onto walls and grind on rails, and this small addition really opens up pretty much every track. You see that lamppost? You can jump off it. That wall? You can ride on it. That rail? You can grind on it. Just about everything in the environment is interactable in some way. While that shines the most in free roam mode, you can still use it to pull off some pretty insane stunts in standard races. If you can picture yourself jumping onto something, 9 times out of 10 the game will let you, opening up tons of new opportunities for organic shortcuts and player expression in every single track. Coupled with the excellent track design that you come to expect from a Mario Kart title, the entire world becomes your oyster. It's sort of ironic then, that this game with arguably the most fun and expressive 3-lap racing in any kart racer I've ever played, is the one that goes out of its way to make engaging in 3-lap races the most difficult. Due to the open world, most races will start on one track and end on another. Each track is connected by the same roads the player can use in free roam mode. A novel concept on paper, and there are even entire modes built around this concept like Knockout Tour, which is basically an endurance race taking you through multiple different courses in one go. The lowest ranking players will get eliminated at predetermined checkpoints, with the last one standing at the end being the winner. Knockout Tour works because you're essentially doing an entire Grand Prix in one race. To win, you have to be on your toes and ready to react to whatever is thrown your way at any given time, since one wrong move or unlucky item selection can mean the difference between survival or elimination. The intermission tracks work here because it's one continuous race, making them inherently more interesting since you have to be on guard at all times. In standard races, however, this setup means that the first 2 laps of most races are dedicated to the intermission roads that take you from one track to another, leaving 1 lap for the course at your destination. This is unfortunate because most intermission courses are painfully dull, often only consisting of straight lines and a few curves or jump ramps started here and there. There are a handful that are a little more interesting. The lead up to Rainbow Road, for example, sticks out in my mind for its otherworldly atmosphere, but for the most part, they tend to lack the plethora of interactivity that transforms the main courses. The only real thing to keep you engaged are any items picked up during the lap, which in my opinion ends up being more of a nuisance than engaging racing. It also results in each course leaving less of an impact overall, since I'd barely get to see or learn most courses before immediately moving on to another one. If you're playing local versus mode, you can still choose to play standard 3-lap races at will, but there's no way to choose them in online mode. While you can occasionally get a 3-lap race, there's no way to guarantee that one will show up, which means a large portion of the races are dedicated to more or less downtime as you wait for the game to become fun again when you get to a real course. This could be easily fixed with an option to always vote for a 3-lap race, or to disable intermissions entirely during lobby creation. But come on now, this game was only $80. They didn't have time to implement such a quality of life feature like that. You got the cow. Be happy. While I still enjoy Mario Kart World, It's hard to deny that the game feels like it's holding itself back in some places by not offering its players the choice to play the game how they want, when they want. Sonic Racing Crossworlds, meanwhile, I think manages to be a lot more consistent with its take on freedom and player expression. Instead of portraying these aspects through its world and track design like Mario Kart, Crossworlds instead decides to implement it into just about every other aspect of the game's racing mechanics. Something that surprised me about Crossworlds is just how many different options you have for customizing your racing experience. For starters, there are 5 different vehicle classes, including speed, acceleration, handling, power, and boost. Each class has its own unique attributes. Speed classes, for example, have the highest top speed. Acceleration classes reach their top speed faster. Handling classes are able to take tighter turns without losing any speed. And power classes are able to push around other racers easier, recover from damage faster, and don't lose rings when hitting a wall. The boost class is a little unique, as it's entirely comprised of the Extreme Gear hoverboards from the Riders games. While they don't control anything like their Riders counterparts, they do have some unique attributes compared to the other vehicle type. These boards fill up their drift charges faster than the other vehicles, so in the right hands they're able to maintain some insane speeds by boosting all the time. It's basically like picking between a standard car and a bike in Mario Kart. There's a handful of pre-made vehicles for each class type, but you can also customize each vehicle type with a variety of different parts that you can mix and match in the garage. These can affect the stat distribution of your vehicle, and there's also tons of different cosmetic options so you can make pretty much anything you can picture in your head. All characters are also assigned a specific class. For example, Sonic is a speed type, Knuckles is a power type, Jet is a boost type, and so on. Choosing a specific character will skew the stats of any vehicle into their class type, so if you want to use a certain class for its specific attributes, you can use character types to offset any weaknesses your vehicle might otherwise have. Finding the right character and vehicle combination to suit your playstyle is key to winning every race, and that's before you even touch the different gadgets you can play around with. The gadget system lets you choose between different modifiers for your vehicle, ranging from gadgets that influence the items you get from boxes, how many items you can hold at once, or even upgrades to certain items like turning the boxing glove into a giant one that hits harder. There are gadgets that allow you to perform more air tricks after a jump, others that fill the drift charge faster, and some that give you an additional level 4 drift charge that will make you temporarily invincible when you release it. You only have access to 6 different gadget slots at a time, and some gadgets will take up more slots depending on their strength. This means you have to prioritize what effects are the most viable given your chosen character and vehicle. You can have 5 different gadget presets that you can choose from in between races, so if you get sick of one set or feel like you need a change of pace, you can easily switch to a new loadout and change how you approach a race. What I really appreciate about Crossworlds' customization options is that they give the player a ton of opportunities for different builds without making any one build feel too overpowered. There are definitely a few gadgets that are objectively pretty shit, but because you only have 6 slots to work with, and the stronger gadgets can take anywhere between 2 and 3 slots, you're forced to spec into a specific playstyle to get the most out of a gadget set. Maybe you want to go for a build that lets you hold on to more rings, to help maintain your highest top speed, or a build that lets you chain together more air tricks to get consistent boosts. There are even gadget sets that increase your stats on specific laps, so you can choose to try rocketing ahead at the start to maintain a lead, or try to steal a victory right at the very end. These gadgets can give you a much needed boost, but players' skill is still required to make up for the areas that they can't cover. It allows every player to approach a race with a different playstyle and build, while giving them all an equal chance at victory. I find myself preferring this approach to Mario Kart Worlds because it doesn't compromise fun for the sake of its vision. I think it's interesting how both games opted to implement a mechanic that replaces portions of a race, but in entirely different contexts. Mario Kart World goes for a road trip vibe, where you start a race at point A and end at point B, which, while novel, can run its course quicker than a more traditional race if not done correctly. Crossworlds, meanwhile, manages to introduce a sense of unpredictability into every race via the Crossworlds, without making any of the races stale. Unlike Mario Kart World, the Crossworlds lap still manages to be as engaging as the lap before and after it, since it's still designed as an actual racetrack, instead of a means to get from one place to another. It also helps that they're aesthetically more interesting than most of the intermission roads. The Crossworlds manage to avoid the sense of downtime that I feel plagues Mario Kart World's races after you put a little bit of time into it, and it's a big part of the reason I find this game easier to come back to. So now we circle back to the question I asked at the beginning of the video: what makes Sonic Racing Crossworlds so addicting? I think it's because the game manages to remain simple and approachable, especially compared to its competitors. I commend Mario Kart World for trying something new. At the end of the day, it remains a fun game when everything clicks, but it's one that I feel is held back by slightly barring the player the choice to play the game how they want to. It may sound silly to ask for the option to essentially turn off the game's central gimmick, but as it is now, I think the game would be much more engaging if I could play on the actual courses more than the in-between sections I don't find as engaging. Crossworlds, in comparison, is relatively simple. It doesn't do anything that any previous games haven't already tried, but I think that's partially its greatest strength. By refining what was already there and adding a ton of that Sonic flair to it, the game remains easy to pick up and play while also being engaging race after race. There's always something crazy happening, whether that's being transported to a different location, narrowly dodging an item, or taking a tight shortcut and rocketing into first place. Customization options like vehicle types and gadgets offer a little something for more competitive players to sink their teeth into, and they make each race an opportunity to try out something new if you want to try out a different build or gadget set. It manages to remain approachable while retaining enough depth to keep things from getting stale, a tough balance to strike without completely breaking the game balance. It helps that this game has seen a constant stream of updates since launch. I don't think multiplayer games necessarily need a constant stream of updates to remain engaging. But in an era where it feels like people are always eager to move on to whatever the next big thing is, there is value in keeping a game as relevant as possible. They've managed to do just that with a constant stream of new updates, whether that be new racers and courses, or the occasional festival that offers unique rewards. Sonic Racing Crossworlds is a love letter to the classic arcade racers of old. Its races never cease to be adrenaline-filled bloodbaths, and its simplicity makes it super approachable for anyone of any skill level. It's filled from top to bottom with that classic Sonic charm, from its variety of lovable characters and locations, to intricately connected gameplay mechanics woven perfectly into the gameplay loop. It feels like nowadays that a lot of games feel the need to rewrite the script in order to be successful. Everything has to have some sort of new, unique gimmick that sets this game apart from the rest. There's nothing wrong with experimenting and pushing the boundaries of what you'd come to expect of a kart racer, but I think sometimes refining what already worked can be just as impactful as a full deviation. In a year where more kart racers set out to be different, maintaining the status quo suddenly becomes a selling point. There's still value in remaining simple, approachable, and more importantly, fun. Crossworlds doesn't need to do anything drastic to set itself apart from its contemporaries, or change the landscape of the kart racing genre as we know it to be successful. All it needs to do is offer a fun and addicting gameplay loop with a strong enough mechanical depth to keep players coming back for more. All it really needs to stand out is to be unabashedly itself. All it really needs to be is Sonic Racing.
Finally, it's time for our epic rematch. Don't disappoint me.
Prepare for a humiliating defeat.
Let's get out there and bring a whole new meaning to speed.